Hello everyone and welcome back to the Prado Museum for more of our Wednesday conversations in English. This is brought to you with the help of the American Friends of the Prado Museum. The American Friends is a nonprofit organization and everything that we do is to help the Prado. And you can find out more about all of our projects and how you might get involved on our website. Now today we'll be looking at a very special painting here at the Prado. What we're standing in front of right now might actually be one of the very first examples of plein air painting in the history of Western art. This is a landscape painted by Diego Velázquez around 1630 called A View of the Gardens at Villa Medici. And today we're going to see what makes this painting so special, so unique. And when we look at it, the first thing that we might think is that it's kind of hard to say what it is about. There's not a real clear narrative here. We can see nature, we can see architectural elements, and there's a few people here and there scattered about. We can see these two men here that are having a conversation maybe. And above them, it looks like a woman who's maybe hanging a linen across the balcony, maybe a sheet. But it doesn't really seem like these groups are interacting or their actions really relate to each other in any way. It just seems like the setting, like the landscape, is really the central subject of the painting. And this is very unusual in the 17th century. This is when the landscapes as a genre are starting to take off with painters like Claude Lorrain. But if we think of Claude Lorrain's paintings, his landscapes are much more carefully composed and idealized than this. This is a much more direct impression of a landscape that we see here. And so I've already alluded to the next point that makes this painting so special. That Velázquez painted these outdoors, meaning that he painted them plein air. This was very uncommon in the 17th century for an artist to pick up all of his materials, leave the studio, go outside, and look directly at his subject while he was painting. And this is really a precursor for what Impressionists are going to do over 200 years later. Before this, artists might have done sketches outdoors, but then they would take those sketches and then they would go back to the workshop where they would work on them, transfer them to a canvas, perfect the compositions, really make the painting, compose the painting in an indoor controlled setting. And here Velázquez is doing something very different. And this isn't the only aspect that really surprisingly predates modern painting. Some experts point out that there is a notable importance on the light here. We can see it in the colors everywhere, and also the shadows. If we look behind this sculpture, we can see this really pronounced shadow here. And this makes us think not just of a place, but also a time of day. Again, this makes us think of the Impressionists, right? This painting might represent late afternoon, early evening. And this makes us think of how Impressionist painters would study the effects of light at different times of day. These are also painted very quickly and done with very little paint, with what we call alla prima. Alla prima is a technique in oil painting that is done quickly without letting one layer dry before you put the next layer on, which is why it's also called wet on wet. And this lets a painter work on an entire image at once to get the impression of an entire image instead of painting one part of the painting, letting it dry, going to another part, letting it dry, coming back to the first. And he's able to work more quickly and get a whole impression. And this is done with such little painting. There are actually spots here that we can see the canvas if we get close. We can see the threads of the canvas here. The vertical and the horizontal lines of the warp and the weft, those are the names for the threads of the fabric that make up a canvas. And if we step back again, I think that we can see that these horizontal and vertical lines actually are really repeated throughout the whole painting, in the trees, in the architecture, in the boards here. All of these horizontal and vertical lines really give structure to the image, and they also give a sense of still, of calm. Now, as the title of the painting suggests, Velázquez painted these views in the gardens of the Villa Medici, a very important palace with lush gardens in the center of Rome. And in 1630, we note that Velázquez was staying in Rome, and he was staying for the summer in the Villa Medici. Probably one of the reasons would be to study the magnificent collection of classical sculpture that they had there. And we can see bits of references to those sculptures here in this painting, both here and here. And this painting actually has a pair with it that we'll see now, another view of another corner of the garden. And we can see more sculpture right here in the middle this time. And this is of the sleeping Ariadne, which is actually the very sculpture that later in Velázquez's second trip to Rome, he would have copied. And that copy is the sleeping Ariadne that you can see in the Prado Museum here today. So what makes these so fantastic, so unique, is that Velázquez is really just painting a moment, a particular light, a mood in nature, a passing moment. They are really as enigmatic as they are original. Like what is behind these boards? We don't know. We can't see what's behind these boards. It's a mystery, but it adds to the obscure, mysterious feeling of the painting. And when we look at these, we can also think of time, of the passing of time. You get the feeling of nostalgia, of melancholy that Velázquez is capturing here, a feeling of decadence in the condition of the architecture that we see in front of us. We don't know what's behind those boards, but practically speaking, it probably would be a part of the villa that was in ruins or in need of repair. It's a painting that's full of beauty, but again, also these feelings of melancholy and decadence, and it's emphasized with the light, right? With the light of a setting sun. So Velázquez captures this feeling, this moment, this landscape, and this moment of feeling nostalgic about beauty, the passing of time, but really without turning it into a narrative, without adding any story to transmit this to us. Just presenting us his own vision of this very quiet, personal impression of a certain time and feeling in a certain place. So I hope that you've enjoyed having a closer look here at the views of the Villa Medici by Velázquez. And if you're interested, do go to the website of the American Friends of the Prado Museum, find out more about the projects that we work on and how you might get involved. And we'll see you here again next Wednesday for more videos in English.